Hi, I'm Grace, and this Christmas, I flew home to find my family gone. No lights, no tree, just my 6-year-old granddaughter eating a cold sandwich alone at the table. There was a note. It said they used my savings and left her with me, without warning, without a call. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing this wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. One they started long ago, when they stopped inviting me, started calling me forgetful, quietly moving my name off papers and putting theirs in. They wanted me to disappear. But what happens when the mother they erased decides to fight back? The airport in Spokane greeted me with the kind of cold that seeps into your joints, the kind that reminds you you're not from here anymore. I pulled my coat tighter, one hand gripping the worn leather handle of my suitcase, the other clutching a soft red box with a bow I'd tied myself. Inside, a sweater I'd spent 2 months knitting for May. My granddaughter's favorite color was yellow. I'd remembered that. I always remembered the details, even when the calls from Dylan had gone from weekly to monthly, and Celine's voice had stopped appearing altogether. The cab ride was silent, save for the occasional crunch of tires over ice. My driver didn't ask many questions, and I was glad for it. As we pulled onto the familiar street, the one where I used to walk May in her stroller, I looked for the warm glow of Christmas lights. Not a single bulb. The house sat dark like a secret. "Sure this is the place?" the driver asked. "Yes," I replied, more to convince myself than him. I stepped out, boots sinking into fresh snow. No wreath on the door, no garland, no welcome mat. Just a front porch stripped of cheer. I rang the bell once, no answer. My stomach dropped. I tried the knob. It gave way. The door creaked open into a darkness that felt too heavy for early evening. "Dylan," I called. "Celine?" No reply. The air was cold, no heating. I walked slowly down the hall, adjusting my eyes. The kitchen light above the stove was the only thing flickering dimly. That's when I saw her, May. She sat at the kitchen table, small legs dangling from a chair too tall for her. A half-eaten sandwich lay on a paper towel. No plate, no drink, no napkin. "Hi, Grandma," she said with a smile that was too soft, too unsure. "Mommy said you'd come." The box nearly slipped from my fingers. I placed it on the counter and crossed the room, kneeling beside her. "Where is everyone, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "They're gone. Mommy left a note." I looked around, eyes adjusting to the gloom. On the table was a sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Celine's, rushed and thoughtless. "Used the savings. Off to Cancun. Please watch May this week. No, please come. No, thank you. No number to reach them. Just instructions." I sat in the chair opposite May, the note still in my hand. Its weight heavier than it looked. "Did they tell you when they'd be back?" I asked gently. May shook her head, chewing the crust of the sandwich like it was a punishment. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I opened the app for the shared account I'd kept with Dylan since he was 24, the one I'd used to help with their roof repair a few months back. 0. They'd drained it. The fridge whirred behind me. I opened it, and the light blinked on to reveal nearly nothing. Half a bottle of ketchup, expired milk, 4 slices of sandwich bread. That was it. "How long have you been eating like this, May?" I whispered. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know how long. I helped her brush her teeth, changed her into the pajamas I found folded in a laundry basket, and set up a cot for her next to the couch in the living room. She was asleep within minutes. I returned to the kitchen, that awful note still between my fingers. I didn't cry. There wasn't even enough left in me to scream. Instead, I sat, in silence. The house creaked around me, settling into its winter bones, or maybe just reacting to the truth finally being seen. My other hand curled into a fist against the table. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. They didn't forget me. They chose to leave me out. And now I would choose something too. I stayed awake the whole night listening to every creak in that house. It wasn't just the cold keeping me up. I stayed awake through most of the night, curled up on the lumpy couch, listening to the sounds the house made in the dark. Not a creak felt unfamiliar. I'd once known this home better than anyone. My back ached from the stiff cushions, but I didn't dare move too much. May was sleeping soundly on the cot beside me, little legs tangled in a faded blanket. Outside, snow fell in steady rhythm, clinging to the windows like frostbitten lace. The furnace hadn't kicked on once. The air was sharp with cold, yet still somehow easier to bear than the chill that had crept into my bones since reading that note. Morning didn't so much arrive as it simply replaced night. The room lightened slightly, but the stillness stayed. I sat up slowly, every joint reminding me I wasn't 50 anymore. May was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with crayons scattered around her and a coloring book open to a page of cartoon reindeer. She looked up at me and smiled like last night had been just another bedtime. I rose, moved toward the kitchen, and opened the fridge again. Nothing had changed. A few condiments, an almost empty jug of milk. I managed to find some instant oatmeal packets tucked in the pantry behind a can of green beans. They weren't expired. Small victory. I boiled some water and stirred slowly, trying not to think too hard about everything I wasn't saying out loud. May climbed onto one of the stools at the counter, swinging her feet. I placed a warm bowl in front of her, along with a spoon that still had water spots from the dishwasher. We ate in silence until she looked up mid-bite and said, "Mommy said you weren't supposed to come." My hand stopped halfway to my mouth. "She did?" May nodded. "She said you don't belong here anymore. This house isn't yours." I put the spoon down, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. "She also said..." May's voice dropped into a sing-song whisper. "She and Daddy are building a new life, without old people drama." There it was, clear as glass, not words May could have come up with on her own. Those belonged to someone else. A child parroting the language of a woman who had decided I was a burden, a relic, a phase to be moved past. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly and offered, "Thank you for being honest, sweetheart." May gave me a small smile, then went back to coloring as if nothing had shifted, but something had. Deep inside me, something settled and something else cracked open. I watched her for a moment longer before cleaning up breakfast and stepping away to the hallway closet. I pulled out an old photo album I remembered tucking there years ago. As I flipped through pages of birthdays, graduations, baby showers, I wasn't searching for nostalgia. I was confirming something. I had always been there, but now it was like someone had started writing a new story without me. Not a confrontation, just a quiet removal. They weren't pushing me out. They'd already deleted me. That afternoon, I wrapped myself in a heavier coat and walked to the pharmacy 3 blocks away. It was a crisp walk, not enough to shake the anger, but enough to remind me I was still capable. On the way, I stopped at an ATM and checked the balance of my old joint account with Dylan. $312. That was it. No savings, no safety net, nothing. I walked back slowly, heart burning with clarity more than pain. When I stepped through the door, May greeted me with a hug as if I'd been gone a week. I didn't tell her what I'd discovered. I didn't tell her what I'd started to feel, but I did open my phone and begin a note. I typed in bold, Step 1, list everything taken, money, place, trust. I stood in front of the fridge that evening, hands resting on the door handle, eyes staring at the near-empty shelves again. My eyes then shifted to the small gold band on my finger. It had dulled over the years, the engraving on the inside nearly worn smooth from time. You erase me quietly, I whispered. I'll return the favor, audibly. Then I typed one more word on the list, history. I knew I needed more than emotions. I needed proof, and I knew exactly where to start looking. While May napped in the late afternoon hush, I sat at the dining table, the same one I had helped Dylan pick out years ago. My phone sat next to my tea, the screen already open to the banking app I'd been avoiding. I stared at the login screen for a moment, breathing through the weight in my chest. Then I entered my credentials and waited. The numbers that came up didn't surprise me. I'd prepared myself, but seeing it there, $217.43, felt like staring into an old scar that had never quite closed. That account once held enough to help them through anything: car repairs, medical bills, even the down payment on this very house. Now, line after line of withdrawals labeled consulting, house projects, holiday fees. Each one like a breadcrumb in a trail that led straight to betrayal. No emergencies, no explanations, just extractions. I didn't flinch. I didn't let my heart race. I just nodded, as if the numbers confirmed something my soul had already accepted. This wasn't about need. It was about assumption that I would give endlessly, quietly, and always. A soft rustling from the living room drew my attention. May had wandered back in, hair tousled, still clutching her favorite stuffed fox. She beamed and held out a crayon-covered sheet of paper. "Grandma, look what I made. This is our house at Christmas." I took it gently from her hands and studied the colorful scene. The snow-covered house, a tree twinkling in the window, 3 stick figures out front, one taller in red, another in blue, and May between them in yellow. I smiled, but something tugged at the corners of my chest. "Where's Grandma?" I asked gently. May shrugged. "Mommy said this house is for our new family now, so I didn't draw you." The paper didn't crumple, but something inside me did. I ran my fingers along the edges, nodding with what I hoped looked like understanding. "That's okay, sweetheart," I said, voice steady. "It's a lovely drawing." She beamed again and skipped away, unaware that in her innocent hands she had handed me more truth than any adult ever dared to speak out loud. When the quiet returned, I stayed seated, eyes fixed on that drawing. That single page said more than the bank account ever could. I wasn't being phased out. I had already been written out. They weren't just using my money. They were revising our family's story. I got up slowly and walked upstairs to the guest room, opened the old cedar trunk in the closet. Inside were photo albums, thick with decades of smiles and milestones. I flipped through them, page by page. Dylan in his cap and gown, Celine beaming at their wedding shower, baby May sleeping against my chest the day after she was born. All memories that had me at their center. And now, here I was, living in a side room like a visiting aunt. No more. That evening, as May colored by the coffee table, I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop. I opened a new document and began listing everything I had contributed over the years. Every tuition check, every grocery run, every emergency dental bill. I didn't include them to make a case. I included them to make a record, a truth they couldn't erase, with a Sharpie and a smile. I opened a new folder in my cloud storage and titled it Restoration. Then I began scanning pages from the photo albums, uploading evidence, not for revenge, but for preservation. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to document, like the teacher I once was, the woman I still am. As the sun dipped below the icy horizon, May placed her drawing on the table. I folded it carefully and slid it into an envelope. On the front, I wrote 2 words in bold ink. Exhibit A. My phone buzzed. A friend request from Rachel Dunham. We'd taught at the same middle school back in Austin. She'd gone on to law school and had once told me, "If you ever need help untangling a mess, call me before it strangles you." I tapped accept. "Let's begin," I whispered. The next morning, I went digging for more than just memories. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't buzz like adrenaline or melt into sorrow. No, this kind sat low in my chest, weighty and calm, like sand settling after a storm. When morning came, I rose before May and moved quietly through the house. The sky outside was the color of old pewter, muted, unmoved. In the kitchen, the counter had become my war desk. Among junk mail and coupons lay a thick envelope marked with the logo of the mortgage company. It was addressed to Dylan, but my name was on the second line. I opened it out of habit. Inside were final documents confirming the property transfer, what should have been a joint agreement. What I saw instead was a scanned form with a notary seal and my signature, supposedly. I stared at the signature. It mimicked mine well enough, curved the same way, the swoop of the G almost convincing. But there was no loop in the E. I always looped my E. This one was flat, lazy. Someone had tried to imitate my hand and failed. My breath caught, not from panic, but insult. I retrieved my travel folder from my suitcase upstairs. Inside were copies of old checks in my will, scribbled with years of real ink, written in my own careful style. I placed one next to the forged page. No question about it. For years, I taught cursive to 5th graders. I could identify a forged loop from across the room. This was an insult to my intelligence. They assumed I'd never notice. They'd counted on my silence, my age, maybe even my softness. They expected me to stay in the dark, I muttered aloud, the words tasting like acid. But not today. Instead of rage, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't call Dylan. I didn't text Selene. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. Dismissals, deflections, and gaslighting wrapped in syrupy tones. I wasn't here to beg for answers anymore. I was here to build a case. I scanned the entire document and saved it under a new folder I called Legal Evidence. I opened a spreadsheet, something basic at first. Just dates, transaction labels, copies of emails. Then I added a second tab, signature comparisons. I highlighted the differences, noted timelines, connected dots. My hands worked like they had back in my classroom. Organized, clear, methodical. My heart ached, sure, but my spine had never felt straighter. When May woke up, I made her breakfast without mentioning any of it. She asked if we could watch a Christmas movie later, and I said yes. She didn't need to carry the weight I was preparing to move. She just needed to feel safe. Later that afternoon, I sent a single text to Celine. Just found something odd in the mail. Let's talk when you're back. That was all. Not a hint of confrontation. Just a breadcrumb. The read receipt showed up 5 minutes later. No reply. 2 hours after that, she posted a photo on Instagram. A wide shot of a resort pool, cabana umbrellas in the background, a cocktail glass glistening in her hand. The caption read, "Living the life we earned. No drama December." I took a screenshot and labeled it, "Timeline of Lies." They weren't being careful anymore. They didn't think they had to be. I called Lillian Shipman just after sunset. She'd worked as a paralegal for 30 years before retiring to Arizona. I hadn't spoken to her in 2, maybe 3 years, but she answered like no time had passed. "Lily," I said evenly, "how hard is it to prove a forged signature?" There was a pause on the other end. Then she exhaled. "Not hard if you're as organized as I remember." That answer sent something steady through me. I looked around the kitchen, then stood and closed the blinds, one by one. I picked up my notepad from the table and flipped to a fresh page. In the center, I wrote 3 names. Underneath each, I drew lines, arrows, notes, questions, not from emotion, from structure. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from clarity. By midday, I had every document in front of me again, spread across the dining table like a personal exhibit. The sunlight bleeding through the window was weak, casting long shadows that danced across the copies and screenshots I'd already labeled and sorted. I wasn't trying to make it perfect. I was trying to make it undeniable. In the middle of the stack, I found a voicemail I'd nearly forgotten. It was from earlier that year, when Dylan had casually asked for my ID to help with some bank stuff. At the time, it hadn't struck me as odd. Parents hand over documents all the time when they think their children are helping. But now, listening back with a sharpened ear, I caught the hesitation in his voice, the way he said, "handle," instead of "check" or "review," the way he didn't offer any detail. The audio ended. I stared at the screen a moment longer before hitting play again. In the living room, May was curled up with a blanket and watching cartoons. Completely unaware, her grandmother was building a case in silence. I called Lillian again. She picked up after the second ring. "Lily, it's me." I figured. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm not crumbling either." I explained what I'd found, walking her through the forged mortgage paperwork and Dylan's voicemail. I could hear her typing as I spoke. "This isn't just ugly, Grace," she said quietly. "This falls under elder financial abuse." The words landed like stones in my gut. I had suspected betrayal, but hearing it categorized, named, put into legal context, it shifted something in me. Suddenly, I wasn't just a mother who'd been taken advantage of. I was a victim in the eyes of the law. Lillian gave me the number of a lawyer she trusted, someone who'd worked in elder rights cases for years. "Don't wait too long," she warned. "Paper trails grow cold fast." I jotted the name and number down with no tremble in my hand. After lunch, while May napped again, I sat at the kitchen table and made the call. The receptionist patched me through to a junior paralegal named Jess. "Hi, this is Grace Araujo," I said. "I'm calling about a matter involving financial misuse by family members. My friend Lillian Shipman referred me." Jess was polite, calm. She asked for basic details. I kept it clean, straightforward. Then she paused. "We actually had a call from your daughter-in-law about a week ago. she said slowly. She asked about the process for initiating power of attorney, citing concern for your memory. I stayed silent long enough that Jess added, "She said you had wandered off during Thanksgiving. She was concerned about cognitive decline." "I wasn't at Thanksgiving," I said, my voice cold. "Oh," Jess replied. "Well, I suppose that changes the context." "Yeah," I said. "I suppose it does." We wrapped the call. She promised to send an email outlining options. That night, after May had gone to bed, I opened a new tab in my evidence file. Intent to commit control via mental incapacity. Narrative. I wrote that title with the same pen I used to correct student essays 20 years ago. Steady, unwavering. I filmed a short video using my laptop. No tears, no theatrics, just me, stating my name, my current date, my mental condition, and what I had documented so far. I listed names. I cited evidence. Then I saved it in 3 separate cloud drives, just in case. I emailed one copy to Lillian with the subject line, "In case they try to silence me." That evening, I packed a manila folder with key documents, the forged mortgage transfer, the bank withdrawal list, the voicemail from Dylan, and the details from Jess. I added printed screenshots of Celine's recent vacation posts, just for context. Across the top in black Sharpie, I wrote, "If anything happens to me." I slipped it beneath my sweaters in the suitcase I still hadn't unpacked. Finally, I picked up my phone, stared at Celine's name in my messages, and typed, "I know more than you think. Let's talk when you get back." I saw the bubble indicate she'd read it. No reply. The message was read. No reply. But the next day, the house betrayed even more. May had spent the morning dancing through the house in her socks, humming to herself, while I searched the garage for old wrapping paper. I told her we'd tried to decorate what we could, make it feel like Christmas, even if only on the surface. She seemed content enough with the promise. I needed the distraction, but what I found among the tangle of lights and crushed boxes didn't warm my heart. It stopped it. Under the dusty limbs of the artificial tree, shoved into the corner, was a gift. Wrapped perfectly in red foil paper, complete with a gold ribbon and a label that made my mouth go dry. To May, love Grandma. I never wrapped it, never wrote it, and the handwriting wasn't mine. Curious, I peeled back the tape carefully. Inside was a boxed dollhouse, exactly the one May had pointed at on TV weeks ago. The price tag still stuck to the back, read $179.99. I could never have afforded that. I couldn't even justify new boots for myself this winter. "Grandma!" May squealed, rushing in behind me. "You got it! Mommy said you were going to surprise me." My hands froze around the box. I looked at her glowing face, and all I could manage was a nod. "That's great, sweetheart," I said. That afternoon, when May settled down for a nap, I opened my laptop. It took less than 2 minutes to find the post. Celine, smiling beside the dollhouse, glass of wine in hand, captioned, "Thanks to Grandma for always spoiling her girl. Family matters." The comments flowed. Friends, acquaintances, strangers. "Your MIL is so sweet. What a lucky little girl. She looks like a Christmas angel." And there I was, silent, erased, and used. My name had become a prop, a costume worn by someone else, not for love, for image. Scrolling down further, my fingers turned cold again. There it was, Celine, on the beach, a cocktail in one hand, her other lifted in a wave. The camera had caught the sunlight hitting the gold band on her finger. Not just any band, my wedding ring. I scrambled upstairs, heart hammering, dug through my suitcase, rifled through every pocket, every pouch. The small velvet bag was gone. In the post, her caption read, "A family keepsake reborn. Forever grateful." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, one hand gripping the frame. "You don't even believe in marriage," I whispered. The air was too still. Every part of me screamed, and yet my body didn't tremble. I wasn't confused. I was clear. That night, after brushing May's hair and tucking her in, I opened my laptop again, clicked record. "Dylan," I began, voice level, "you let her take my ring. You let her wrap a gift with my name, pretend it came from me. You let her use my face while discarding my presence. I'm done being silent. I expect to see you by the 24th. We are talking. In person. No yelling, just a closing statement." Before going to bed, I walked back to the living room. The gift was still under the tree, glittering under the weak light. I picked it up, crossed out the words, "Love Grandma," with a thick black Sharpie, and wrote in bold, "Not from me." Then I placed it right in the center of the living room floor. May, now standing in the hallway in her pajamas, rubbed her eyes. "Grandma?" she asked. I looked at her gently, crouched to her level. "Sweetheart, it's time you learned what the truth looks like." The house answered me the next morning, and not with silence this time. The next morning brought more than cold air and silence. It brought a letter addressed to Thomas Araujo, my husband, who'd been gone for over 15 years. The envelope was thick, official, and unexpected. I stared at it for a long moment before slicing it open, half expecting it to be a clerical error. But the contents were far more deliberate than that. Inside was a policy update from an old life insurance plan I'd nearly forgotten existed, the kind you set up in your 30s and never think about again. I skimmed the details until one line made my stomach drop. Beneficiary change confirmed. New primary, Celine Gacy, per recent family agreement. There was no agreement. There was no discussion. And my signature? Nowhere. They hadn't even bothered to forge my name this time. Just moved forward, like I was already gone. I set the letter down on the counter and didn't speak. My pulse stayed steady, but my vision narrowed to a tunnel of sharp inner seniority. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had plans for my absence. Later that day, I remembered what Lillian said about Selene calling her legal contact. I called the same office, polite but direct. The receptionist transferred me to a paralegal who hesitated when I asked whether any records of calls could be disclosed. "I believe there is a recorded conversation from earlier this month," she said carefully. "If you're listed on the original policy, you may request a copy under verification." 2 hours later, the email arrived. I waited until May was settled with her crayons and a Christmas movie before pressing play. Celine's voice crackled through the speakers, calm, confident. "She's old. She forgets things. This might be our only chance to secure the family's future." There it was. She didn't even try to hide the condescension. I listened 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to memorize the cadence of her betrayal. I forwarded the audio to Lillian with a brief note. "Add this to the file." Then I opened a blank document and wrote a formal statement of intent, outlining the timeline, the financial irregularities, the mental health narrative they were trying to build against me. I titled it, "Pending Legal Action, if not resolved by December 24th. I printed, signed, and scanned the document. Then I placed it into Dylan's old desk drawer upstairs, the one he used to store his college acceptance letters and Father's Day cards May had scribbled on construction paper. They wanted paperwork, I would give them a mountain. As the sky dimmed and the wind picked up, I returned to the living room. The false gift under the tree, wrapped with lies and labeled with my name, was gone. I had thrown it out. In its place, I taped the printout of the insurance update to the refrigerator. Above it, I wrote in red marker, "When love isn't enough, this is what you think I'm worth." May noticed. She stood silently for a moment, eyes scanning the paper, then looked at me. "Is this one of those grown-up problems?" I crouched beside her and nodded. "Yes, it is. And it's time you learned what truth feels like, not just what people want you to see." She nodded slowly. Then she asked if we could bake cookies later. Like it was just another Tuesday. Children are funny that way. Resilient, even when they don't fully understand what they're surviving. That night, I sat near the front door, a small lamp casting a pool of light on the floor. The folder of documents lay beside me, full, heavy, alive with evidence. I didn't shake. I didn't blink much either. They'd return. I knew it. And I'd be ready. "Come home," I whispered into the quiet. "Let's finish this." And they did come home. Just not the way they expected. They came in around 9:30 that night. I knew the sound of their car before the headlights touched the living room wall. Their tires crunched across the driveway like a warning. I didn't move from the chair. I sat, legs crossed, a manila folder on my lap, the overhead light casting long shadows across the coffee table. May had fallen asleep an hour ago. Her bedtime had come with no arguments, just the quiet compliance of a child who felt something larger brewing in the house. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and told her not to worry. That part, at least, I could promise. The door opened. Dylan walked in first, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Celine followed, dragging a sleek suitcase behind her. Her perfume hit in the room before she spoke. "Did May behave?" she asked, forcing a smile, as if we were all playing parts in a scene she directed. I nodded once, didn't return the smile, didn't stand. Dylan glanced around. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. He saw the folder on my lap, the papers arranged with purpose. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, barely, but enough. "Sit," I said. "You'll want to hear all of this." One by one, I laid the documents on the table, a printout of the bank transactions, each withdrawal highlighted, the copy of the forged mortgage transfer, with my signature, not my hand, the insurance policy update, with Celine's name where mine used to be, and finally, the transcript of the recorded phone call, already printed, dated, and signed by me. I watched them both. Dylan looked like a boy again, lost in a classroom he hadn't studied for. Celine's smile faltered, cracked, then vanished entirely. "You've been very busy," she said, voice flat. "No," I said, "you have. I'm just catching up." She turned to Dylan. "She's overreacting. She's confused." I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for the phone on the table, tapped once, and let the audio play. Her voice, crystal clear. "She's old. She forgets things. This might be our only chance to secure the family's future." When it ended, the room was thick with something neither of them could dismiss. "You said I was forgetful," I said, eyes on Celine. "That this was your only chance. Let's talk about that now, face to face." Celine stood, arms folded. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the center of this family anymore. People move on." Moving on doesn't mean stealing, I said. It doesn't mean fabricating signatures. It doesn't mean planning for my death before I'm cold. I laid out my terms. You will return the funds you took within 30 days. You will remove Celine from any and all legal ties to my estate, and you will write, sign, and notarize a formal apology. Not because I need it, but because it will exist. On record. Dylan blinked. Mom, do you really want to do this to us? You already did this, I said. I'm just putting the name on it. Celine scoffed and stormed toward the hallway. She's lost it. This is crazy. Dylan didn't follow her. He stayed, eyes on the folder. Maybe for the first time, he saw the shape of what he'd allowed. Or maybe he was still trying to convince himself this would all pass. It wouldn't. I stood, left the folder on the table. You have until midnight tomorrow, I said. This isn't a threat. It's clarity. Then I walked past him, past the perfume that still clung to the air, and climbed the stairs. The mother they thought they'd buried beneath silence had just stood up. I expected silence that night, but what I got instead cracked everything open. The morning after the confrontation arrived quiet, blanketed in snow that softened even the harshest edges of memory. I rose before the sun crested over the neighboring rooftops and moved through the house slowly, like someone walking through the last few pages of a book they already knew by heart. In the kitchen, I found May curled on a stool, chin resting on her folded arms. She didn't speak when I entered, just looked up and smiled. I smiled back, reached for the skillet, and made pancakes the way my own mother once made them for me. The kind you eat slowly, not because they're gourmet, but because they feel like something you can trust. We ate together in a comfortable hush. When we were done, I fetched a small pine branch I'd found the day before, stuck it into a mason jar, and handed May a box of old ornaments. She decorated it without hesitation. No Christmas tree this year, but joy isn't measured by size. The manila folder sat untouched on the table, its corners slightly curled. Dylan and Celine hadn't responded, but silence had become predictable. Silence didn't shake me anymore. After lunch, the knock came. Dylan stood in the doorway alone. His posture slumped, and Hasu held a thin stack of papers with the same care someone might hold a newborn or a bomb. She's not coming back with me, he said. She's already calling it emotional abuse, what you did. I took the papers without responding, scanned the top page, a draft apology letter, clumsy in tone, but signed. The second page was a ledger showing partial repayments, dates, dollar amounts, and transfer confirmations. The sum wasn't full, but it was movement. I waited a moment, then looked up. I didn't do anything to her, I said. I just stopped protecting what betrayed me. He flinched at that, and I didn't apologize for the sting. We sat in silence while I reviewed the documents, marking sections that needed correction. I added a cover letter and printed a release, one that outlined the terms of resolution. Full restitution within 60 days. Celine removed from any financial and legal connection to my estate. A notarized statement of apology. I signed it, sealed a copy for Lillian. Then, as Dylan watched, I placed the envelope into the outgoing mail bin like it was any other errand. After he left, I poured tea and sat by the window. The snow had picked up again, covering the tire tracks he left behind. The air inside the house was still, finally not tense, just still. That evening, I pulled out my old journals. I flipped to an entry from the day Dylan was born. Tiny loops of cursive ink now faded at the edges. He was mine once, I wrote underneath. But people change, and when they forget who you are, you remember yourself. I logged into the shared admin account that somehow no one had thought to remove me from. I found Celine's tribute post, the one where she thanked me for the dollhouse she bought with stolen money, and I deleted it with one click. Then I opened a new post window and typed, "I am not gone. I am just no longer silent." I posted it, closed the laptop, and sat in the quiet of what was left. Christmas Eve came as gently as the snowfall. May and I sat near our makeshift tree, each holding a candle. I lit mine and said, "This is for survival." She lit hers and looked at me, eyebrows raised. "And this?" she asked. "For starting over." She nodded. "Will Daddy come back?" "Maybe," I said. "But we don't need saving, do we?" She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "No, we have pancakes." Sometimes the hardest part of standing up for yourself isn't the confrontation. It's realizing you waited this long to do it. I spent decades believing that love meant sacrifice, that silence kept peace, but silence also erases you, and I won't be erased anymore. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, let me tell you, you're not alone and you're not without power. What would you do if the people you trusted most used your kindness against you? Have you ever had to choose between family peace and self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Was there a moment when you finally said, "Enough"? If this story moved you or reminded you of something real in your own life, leave a comment with one, or tell me what state you're watching from. If it didn't connect, let me know why. I want to learn from you too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel for more true human stories that might just help you find your voice again.